John was so charming, and because he was so well liked, people couldn't put the shooter with his personality.
I guess the saying that not all that glitters is gold holds true in the story of John Allen. His smiles and charisma was not a sign that all was well with the world. In fact, it could be a perfect disguise for even the worst of us. Anyone who met John Allen Muhammad before he was arrested could have easily assumed that he was the nice next-door neighbor, a gentleman driving a Chevrolet Caprice, or the cool gentleman who always held the door for the next person. But there is more to his story than all of that. On the 2nd of October in the year 2002, the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area was gripped by fear as a sniper began a calculated killing spree across town. People were walking on the street with fear and trepidation, not knowing where the next bullet will be coming from or who the next victim could be. Over the next 3 weeks, 10 innocent people lost their lives, and 3 others were critically injured. The attacks were the work of John Allen Muhammad and his teenage accomplice, Lee Boyd Malvo, who conducted the murders from a modified blue 1990 Chevrolet Caprice. The seemingly random nature of the shootings instilled terror, making everyday activities, pumping gas, shopping, or walking to school feel like life or death decisions. Parents warned their kids not to step out of the house if not absolutely necessary. And those who have to be up and about every day were constantly watching their backs. Who is going to drop dead next? Fear was all over the city. The hunt for the snipers ended on October 24, 2002, when John Allen and Malvo were arrested in Maryland. After a high-profile trial, John Allen was sentenced to death, while Malvo received a life sentence without parole. On November 10, 2009, John Allen faced the ultimate consequence for his actions. This is the story of his final moments on Earth, the last 24 hours of John Allen Muhammad. Inside Greensville Correctional Center in Virginia, John Allen Muhammad woke up to his final morning, 6 a.m., November 10, 2009. He had spent years in solitary confinement, and by this point, he was accustomed to the routine. But this day was different. He had woken up to a day with no tomorrow. The day that the word tomorrow ceased to exist in his dictionary. 3 weeks into his rage murder, John Allen was arrested in Maryland, the primary location of the attacks, but he was not prosecuted in Maryland. John Allen's trial for the murder of several of his victims began in the month of October 2003 and was concluded with a conviction for capital murder. 4 months later, he was sentenced to death. The attorney in charge of his case moved to have it transferred to Virginia because the state was considered more likely to impose a death sentence on him and also take care of his accomplice, not just letting him off the hook on the promise of him being just a teenager. The prediction of him getting a death sentence in Virginia proved accurate based on the verdicts in both states. Additionally, Virginia permitted the death penalty for juveniles. Although young Lee Boyd was not sentenced to death, he got a capital punishment as well. He is currently spending the rest of his life in prison. While awaiting execution in Virginia, he was transferred to Maryland in August 2005 to face trial for additional charges. In May 2006, he was convicted of 6 counts of first-degree murder. After the conclusion of the Maryland trial, John Allen was returned to Virginia, while authorities considered whether he would still have to face prosecution in other states where he conducted random sniper shootings for additional murders and attempted murders. Though he was not tried for other crimes in Virginia, he remained a potential defendant in cases across multiple jurisdictions. By the night of his execution, he had spent many years in different cells across different states, so he was no stranger to the simple, plain life of prison. Some would even say he had grown accustomed to it. His cell was small and unremarkable: concrete walls, a metal bed, and a thin mattress. As the guards passed by, he showed no emotion, no indication that he was about to meet his end. Prison records indicate that John Allen slept little the night before, though he gave no outward signs of distress. The weight of impending execution is known to affect prisoners differently. Some break down. Some make peace. John Allen remained silent. John Allen was a man who moved with purpose, and most of his moves are calculated. It is believed to be as a result of his military training that became a part of him and helped him on his journey, even though it was a destructive one. At the age of 18, John Allen joined the Louisiana Army National Guard in Baton Rouge as a combat engineer, but he was later moved to the regular Army, where he trained to be a mechanic, truck driver, and metal worker. He was an excellent shooter with the M16 rifle and earned the highest marksmanship badge in the Army. He learned the poise and accuracy of what it meant to handle guns in the military, so after he was discharged, he went on to use his privileged knowledge for dangerous activities and was arrested as a terrorist. John Allen was discharged as an honorable man from the military as a sergeant and was a beneficiary of so many awards like Army Service Ribbon, National Defense Service Medal, Overseas Ribbon, Non-Commissioned Officers, Professional Development Ribbon, and Army Achievement Medal. By 8 o'clock on his last day on Earth, John Allen was served breakfast just like every other inmate: scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice. Unlike many death row inmates who request elaborate final meals, John Allen declined any special request, choosing instead to eat whatever was on the standard prison menu. Guards observed that he ate in silence, no words, no hesitation. He was not a man seeking comfort in food or savoring his last hours. He simply followed the motions, much like he had done during his years of incarceration, appearing stoic like the trained man that he was. Later that morning, John Allen met with his attorneys. This was his final opportunity to discuss any last-minute appeals, though it was clear that no further legal action could save him now. His legal team had long argued that he suffered from severe mental illness, possibly exacerbated by brain damage from his time in the military. However, courts had rejected those claims. The verdict stood, and the execution was moving forward. He had been accused of horrendous crimes that bordered on the safety of members of a state and could not be taken lightly. His juvenile partner, Lee Boyd Malvo, could easily have been tagged as a brainwashed participant, but that claim did not stand before the court. Malvo, who was then sentenced to life without parole, although it was later changed to life with parole, shared a more detailed version of their plans with the jury. After receiving psychological counseling, he admitted that he had lied during his earlier trial when he claimed to be the sole shooter in every attack. He said he lied to protect Muhammad from the death penalty, believing that, as a minor, he wouldn't face execution. Over 2 days of testimony, Malvo provided a thorough account of all the shootings. He also described Muhammad's full plan, which had 3 phases targeting the Washington, D.C. and Baltimore metro areas. Phase 1 involved careful planning, mapping, and practicing escape routes so they could quickly leave each crime scene and move to the next location. Muhammad's goal was to kill 6 white people per day for 30 days. However, this plan failed due to traffic, poor vantage points, and limited escape routes. Phase 2, intended for Baltimore, was never carried out. It was supposed to start with the killing of a pregnant woman by shooting her in the abdomen. Then, they planned to kill a Baltimore police officer, followed by a bomb attack at the officer's funeral, using explosives packed with shrapnel to kill other officers attending the service. Phase 3 was set to begin alongside Phase 2. The plan was to extort millions of dollars from the U.S. government, which Muhammad would use to travel to Canada. Along the way, he intended to stop at YMCAs and orphanages to recruit young, vulnerable boys with no parental guidance. Once in Canada, he planned to train these boys to use weapons and send them across the U.S. to carry out mass shootings, similar to those in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. After the pleas for clemency made by his lawyers fell through, it became clearer than ever that he was headed towards death. John Allen's demeanor remained stoic. His lawyers noted that he responded in short, clipped sentences. He did not express fear, remorse, or even defiance. It was as though he had accepted his fate, or perhaps he had been preparing for this moment all along. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, John Allen was granted a brief recreation period in a secured outdoor area as one of the ways of preparing him for his last breath. The sky was overcast, a fitting backdrop for a man living his final hours. He was not talking to anyone. It was a moment of solitude for him, viewing nature for the last time and taking time to soak in everything he was going to miss when he was gone. Did he reflect on his crimes? Did he think about the people he killed, the families he destroyed, or the panic he had inflicted on an entire region? If he did, he showed no sign of it. He stood there in silence, his thoughts known only to himself. It was a lot more than he gave his victims when he shot them in cold blood amidst their regular daily activities. Many of them would have made plans for the future based on what they wanted to do, who they wanted to become, the girl or boy they wanted to marry. But it was already too late for that. John Allen again refused anything beyond the standard prison dinner: chicken and rice, mixed vegetables, and a slice of bread. Unlike the regular inmates on death row, he was not seeking to make any final statements. With his final act, he appeared as a man who was basically going through the motions of his final day, as it had already been predetermined for him by standard prison service. He was cold, detached, and indifferent to the whole ordeal, although if you consider him eating all of his final meals a silver lining, then you have it there. He made several attempts to ensure that his last moments were as natural as possible, not putting up a show of regret, a final act of defiance, or a simple comfort before the end. One of the final acts allowed to death row inmates is a last phone call, and that opportunity came for John Allen by 6 p.m. For many, it is an opportunity to speak to loved ones, to apologize, or to say goodbye, but by now, we have established that John Allen was not the regular man. His stoic behavior extended to his immediate family. He made no attempt to reach them or speak to them in his final moments. For John Allen, there were no calls to his children or his ex-wife, Mildred John Allen. Just like everyone else, they found out on TV that John Allen had been declared the DC sniper and sentenced to death. John Allen and his family had been estranged prior to his arrest. He was issued a restraining order so he could stay away from his ex-wife and children after being reported for abuse. That story cannot be far-fetched because his rage attack was also linked to his desire for wanting to get his kids back, even if it will cause them harm. The only voice on the other end of the line for John Allen that day was that of a distant relative who spoke in quiet tones, offering muted words of comfort. John Allen responded in short sentences. He did not cry. He did not apologize. Then the call ended. The clock continued to tick down. Shortly after 8:30 p.m., the guards arrived at John Allen's cell. It was time to make a walk towards death. He was shackled and led from his cell down the long corridor toward the execution chamber. Under Virginia law at the time, a defendant convicted of capital murder was allowed to choose the method by which he or she will be put to death, either lethal injection or electrocution. As his regular demur throughout the day, Muhammad declined to select a method. By law, the method of lethal injection was selected for him. The walls of the corridor were sterile and brightly lit, a contrast to the dark fate that awaited him at the end of the hall. Upon entering the execution chamber, John Allen was placed on the gurney. Straps were tightened across his arms and legs. An IV line was inserted. Witnesses described his expression as unreadable, neither defiant nor afraid. He appeared to not be afraid of death. Perhaps it even meant escape for him, to get away from all the pain, torture, and maybe guilt that might be weighing on him. Death must have been a fate he accepted since the day he was arrested, because it felt like he was prepared for it all. On the other side of the glass, the families of his victims sat in silence, watching as justice was about to be served. The warden asked the traditional question, "Do you have any final words?" John Allen said nothing. No apologies, no last words, no expression of remorse. Then the executioner administered the lethal injection. The first drug put him to sleep. The second paralyzed his body. The third stopped his heart. At exactly 9:11 p.m., John Allen Muhammad was pronounced dead. In the execution chamber, silence followed. Outside, crowds had gathered, some to protest, others to celebrate. Families of the victims, who had waited years for this moment, expressed mixed emotions. Some felt closure, others felt empty. Maybe he had it too easy, and the punishment was not enough to satiate the gravity of the crime he committed. Muhammad's body was cremated, and the ashes given to his son in Louisiana. The execution of John Allen closed one chapter of the Beltway sniper case, but it did not erase the pain of those who had suffered. The families of the victims would never get their loved ones back. Lee Boyd Malvo, now serving life in prison, had already begun the process of seeking parole under new sentencing laws regarding juvenile offenders. His family, ex-wife and children, will go on to face the impact of his crime all their lives. Although they were already separated by the time he started all the attack, the stain of his crimes will go on to be a lasting mark on their reputation all life long. They will forever be regarded as the wife or kids of the DC sniper. Sad, but evidently goes a long way to show the impact that the action of one man can have on the lives of others connected to him. Maybe he didn't think it through. Maybe he didn't imagine that he would get caught. Or maybe he just doesn't care about the consequences of it all. In the years following the attacks, documentaries, films, and books attempted to dissect John Allen's mind, seeking answers as to why he did what he did. Some believed he was a cold-blooded killer. Others theorized he was a deeply disturbed man who sought control and revenge. Regardless of the theories, the facts remained unchanged. John Allen orchestrated a reign of terror, and on November 10, 2009, his life came to an end in a quiet, sterile room, far removed from the chaos he once created. Justice had been served, but for the victims' families, the scars remained. Scars remained.